TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Well, I mean, I grew up, like, the first thing I did was sell programs. I mean, I remember the very first time I went to the wrestling matches. It's funny how it really never changed that much as a kid till I got into it. It was always pretty much the same thing. I watched wrestling. I was finished selling the programs. I'd watch wrestling from the first match on after that. I'd watch all of them. I pretty much, not realizing, I think I studied wrestling.
Right.
Kind of like what you did, really. Then as I got older, I got into, of course, amateur wrestling. It was like high school wrestling champion. I always knew there was a big difference between the two. Wasn't sure what the extremities of them, what the comparisons between the two. All I knew was you had to fiercely defend it, kind of thing. And then when I really got into wrestling was following that amateur wrestling career through to college. I really wanted to kind of jump off. I wanted to get off of it because it really, in a lot of ways, the amateur wrestling, I won the college championships in whatever year that was. And it really messed up my school. Like, I did well in wrestling, but
right.
My grades suffered for it. And so and they were starting to sort of see this, they started getting my dad all worked up about me going to the Commonwealth Games and stuff like that. I don't really believe I could have won or anything, but there was guys that really wanted to push me to try to go, and you just never know. Maybe because I was good. I just don't know if I was dedicated enough. And I started reasoning that I had to find a way to get out of this amateur wrestling because I didn't like the future of it. I didn't want to be a old, worn out phys ed teacher or amateur wrestling coach, like whatever it is that they do after their careers. And I thought, well, pro wrestling. It's funny how your logic, especially as a kid, but I thought pro wrestling means you're a paid professional, and it would ruin my, like I could be an amateur after that. I couldn't go to the Olympics or whatever it is. And so I had different guys talk to me about getting into pro wrestling. I never really had any desire to do it from the time I was about 16 until I was about 19. And I started thinking about it a little bit. And I remember I got smartened up driving to a town to be a referee. They convinced me that I could referee.
Right.
Some little town, Red Deer, and they kind of smartened me up in the van driving up. Which they didn't tell me anything I didn't already know, but it's like I officially have been smartened up.
Right.
And I refereed. It was just like amateur wrestling referee, like you just pretty much common sense. And I applied the same thought into what it took to be an amateur referee, into a professional wrestling referee. And so I only refereed a little here and a little there, and then I started doing like Monday, Tuesdays, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just the short trips, and that was fine by me. It was a little extra money, that kind of thing. And there was always guys who were talking about teaching me how to get into wrestling, to break me in. And more often than not, they never showed up, which was fine by me. I was like more inclined to sleep in and stuff like that anyway.
Right.
But there was 2 Japanese wrestlers that have been kicked out of the States because their papers expired or something like that. And my dad took them in up here, and actually pretty good. They were really good workers for that era. And they started talking to me about teaching me. And I thought, it wouldn't be a bad idea to learn this pro wrestling. And I thought, at that time, maybe it'd be a good idea to take a little break from the school and from everything, travel around a little bit and see the world a little bit before I...
Did you go down to Dory Funk Juniors?
I went down to see him. Yeah. Well, I went down to Amarillo every summer from the time I was grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and spent a lot of time with all the Funks.
Right.
I knew the family really well. The last time I went was pretty much the same year that I got into pro wrestling. I remember I had a couple of job matches. So, I actually did work the Amarillo territory, if that means anything. I think I worked with...
One of the guys is Dennis Stamp.
Dennis Stamp, yeah. Who was a really good worker at that time, who really looked out for me, because I couldn't even tie up with anybody. And I remember I had a pretty good match with him. But I remember I worked with a guy named Pogo,
right,
who was a Japanese guy. He stiffed the hell out of me, chopped me, beat the crap out of me, really stiffed the shit out of me. And I didn't think I knew any better, but I knew that he was taking liberties.
Right.
And he's, I've always wanted to run into him again, kind of thing. But I was just learning. And then they started teaching me pro wrestling. I learned it for December, January, February, about 4 months. I learned pretty detailed stuff. I mostly learned how to fall over and over and over and over and over, which I think has given me my longevity. I don't think anybody wrestled as hard as me, and this kind of, with the exception of my concussion, been able to walk away from it with their body parts still work, most of them.
Right.
I think a lot of that had to do with how I learned to fall, how to learn to break my fall. Even in college, I took a police science class, which was all how to learn how to break your fall in self-defense, which came around the exact same time, and that with the amateur wrestling. So when I kind of, anyway, I just kind of fell into it and I think I was quite good right off the bat. I think I was better than both my brothers who were working at the time, or at least had more natural, raw ability, and I was going to be bigger than both of them. Keith was a good worker, and Bruce was so-so, but Keith was a good worker, and I think I learned off kind of a little bit of my brothers and whatnot, but and I sort of reasoned that whatever they could do, I could do. I remember my dad had booked my two older brothers, Smith and Bruce, to Puerto Rico,
Right.
to go wrestle B. Hart and S. Hart, and they'd sent airplane tickets up or something like that. And my brother Bruce balked at the last minute, didn't want to go.
Right.
And it was just like that. I mean, it was so sudden. All of a sudden, I was on an airplane flying to Puerto Rico. I did have a couple of matches, stampede matches. I had maybe 2 weeks worth, 3 weeks worth. None of them were ones I wanted to have. Like, I was like, they were short a guy kind of thing.
Right.
And I was just the referee, which means the fans. I wanted to leave and come back in a year or two, and hopefully they forget me as this sort of, because referees always had so much heat on them in those days. But I showed up. I had a couple of matches. Most of them were with sort of old guys and guys that just, some of them were babyface matches and stuff like that. I did remember wrestling the Dynamite Kid.
Right.
And he potatoed the hell out of me. And there was a sort of a bit of an attitude with him and me right off the bat in those days. We became friends after that, but from the beginning there was a real, not for me either. I was walking into it without knowing that he was just kind of like that. Anyway, so I did have a couple of matches under my belt, but nothing to really call me a professional.
You worked Georgia territory a little bit too, right?
Yeah, that came a little later on. I went to Puerto Rico, wrestled there for a couple of months, dropped about 100 pounds or whatever, and got sick and beat up and starved and whatever else they had down there. Fled that place, with relief, and got home for my 20th birthday or something like that. And then I took the summer off. That's where I did go to Amarillo, wrestle a little bit in Texas for 2 or 3 shows or something like that. Came home, started for my dad in September, and I've been going ever since. I think that was probably about 1978 maybe.